Good morning. My name is Jennifer Finnerty, and I'm one of the school counselors at the high school. Today we're going to be talking about grief. So often, I have students come into my office that are struggling with focusing, that are unable to manage their emotions, and after working with them, I find out that they are struggling with coping with grief. Today we've invited in Karen Ketterer from Ellie's Place in Grand Rapids, which is a center for grieving children. She's going to be talking to you today about the characteristics of grief, the impact on learning, and how to help support your grieving child.
Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. Again, I'm Karen Ketterer. I'm a bereavement coordinator at Ellie's Place, West Michigan. I like to start with this quote from Mr. Rogers. Anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be more manageable. When we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. The people we trust with our important talk can help us know we are not alone. Loss is more common than we may think in children. 1 in 12 children in Michigan will experience the death of a parent or sibling before the age of 18. And that's just a parent or sibling. Many more will experience the death of someone close to them, a close grandparent or family member, a friend. So grief is affecting our children quite a bit. Unfortunately, we don't talk about grief very much in our society. So here are some basic things about grief that you might not know. Grief is a normal reaction to any loss. Grief is unique to each person, and it's a lifelong process. It doesn't go through the stages like we think of the stages of grief. And every person has the capacity to heal given an emotionally safe environment, which is what we would like to provide. Children's grief is different than what adults experience. A few of the differences with very young children, they don't understand the finality of death until they're somewhere between 6 and 9 years old. They have a shorter sadness span, so you'll see kids cry and grieve for a couple minutes, and then they'll run and go play with their friends, and that's normal. They have less ability to verbalize their feelings, so it might come out more in behaviors. And also, they don't like to be different from their peers, and bereavement makes them different. So this can be an issue, especially for older kids. Kids also revisit their grief developmentally, which means at each stage that they go through, they're going to come back to that grief and experience it in a different way. So a child who loses a parent when they're 5 is then going to revisit that when they're going through puberty, because that's a totally different stage in their life, and their death means something different to them at that point. Kids have limited coping skills. They haven't learned all of those ways to cope with their emotions yet. They look to adults to model appropriate grief expression, which can be hard because in families then you worry about upsetting one another, but they're really looking to you to model for them what is appropriate when they're grieving. And then they're also likely to blame themselves. Kids are, very much, they are the center of their universe a lot of the time. And what that means when there's a death is that they think that something that they did often had an impact on that or a reason that it happened. So that can lead to a lot of difficult emotions of guilt and anger. And so those are some things that you might see in your children as they're grieving. So how does this affect your kids at school? The impact on learning, the main thing is grief leads to extreme difficulties in concentrating and distractibility. A lot of times the symptoms of grief can mimic symptoms of ADHD. Suddenly your child can't sit in math class anymore and focus on what they're, being told. It gives them limitations in remembering new facts and concepts. So it's very hard for them to keep up with school when their mind is preoccupied with the death and with their own grief and emotions. You might see kids failing to hand in assignments, not doing the work that they normally would do at home. And part of this is their concentration difficulties, and part of it may be changes that have happened at home because of the death. And then any pre-existing learning challenges will become worse during this time. So that is part of the reason that we come into schools and help schools to deal with grief. It has a big impact on how the kids are learning. And so it's important to have the knowledge about it and make sure that teachers and counselors understand what's going on internally with your children. So how can you support your grieving child at home? Here are a few guidelines. Create a safe environment. Make sure that they can come talk to you about what's bothering them. Listen more and talk less. Sometimes you might hear, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth and we should use them accordingly. So that's one of the things that we try to do when we're talking to kids about their grief. Listen more and give less advice, which is usually our job as parents, so that can be really difficult. Reflect back the child's thoughts. Tell them, I heard what you said. It sounds like this is really hard for you. Try to get a little bit to the emotions that they're feeling. It sounds like you're really angry about what happened. And just let them know that you're listening and hearing them. Try to tolerate the different and difficult emotions that kids are having. This is really tough because as parents, we need to put those limits on at home and have those guidelines. But during this time, kids are experiencing all sorts of emotions, lots of anger and guilt and sadness. And so we need to give a little bit more toleration of those emotions that are coming out. Try to support and not solve what's going on. Kids don't actually, during this time, need you to tell them how to fix it because it's not fixable. Grief is something that they're experiencing and it's bringing up emotions, and they just need your support during that time. And just provide opportunities for them to express how they're feeling to you in a safe way. Let them come to you with questions. A lot of times we hear from parents, what should I tell my kids? Well, just make that space for them that they can ask the questions that they're wondering about, and then you'll know what they need to know. One of the ways that Fruitport is helping children grieve is inviting us in to their schools to help run 8-week grief groups here at the high school. We are running one at the moment. And some of the ways that support groups can help is to help children not feel so alone and different in their experience. So the groups bring together kids who are grieving, and then they know as they walk down the hall and they see one of their group members, I'm not the only person experiencing this at this school right now. Everyone works through grief differently, and groups give them a chance to both see how other kids are coping and share how they are coping, and just get different ideas about how they can work through this. In our groups, it's always okay to pass. It is not helpful to make a kid talk about their grief. That's something helpful for you to know at home as well. So we tell them that it's always okay to pass if we ask a question and they don't want to answer it. Our groups are confidential, which means that they have a space that they can express the emotions that they need to without it, being shared with other people. And it provides a structure and a safe place to work through those tasks of grief. So working through, the sadness, the emotions, the memories, and ways to move forward in their lives after a death. Thank you for listening to this information. We're very glad to be partnering with Fruitport High School right now with this group. And if you have any further questions, Ellie's Place, West Michigan is available for phone consultations. We also have on-site groups for children ages 3 to 18 in Grand Rapids. And you can check out more information about us on our website.
Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to your child's school counselor or to myself here at the high school or Ms. Stashak. Thank you for watching, and go Blue.